Welcome, animation fans. My name is Dan, and this is OnAnimation Podcast. My guest for episode 7 is Pixar Animation Studios animator, Allison Rutland. In this episode, we talk about Allison's early career, as well as pushing herself after hours to land a job at Pixar and winning an Annie Award in 2016. We also talk about her biggest artistic influences, we dig into the craft of acting, and discuss her inspirations for animating Riley in Inside Out. There's a lot to love about this episode, and I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to read the show notes as you listen. We talk about several film scenes which I've included below for your convenience. Enjoy! So tell us a little about yourself. Where did you grow up and how did you get involved in animation?
I grew up in Milton, Ontario, Canada. I just always gravitated towards drawing and art, and I was just kind of the kid that could draw at school. I always kind of just did it all through my elementary school. I kind of didn't draw that much in high school. I think the art program in our high school was not very good, and so I just I got into music at that point through high school, and I didn't really do that much art. And then when it came to university, I thought, my mom had encouraged me to take art if I wanted to in university, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do art or science, so I applied to both. That was the thing about my mom. She wanted me to get a university degree, so I had to do something with a degree. So I did. I applied for fine art, and then I applied for science, and then I got into both, and I ended up just taking fine art at McMaster. And it's not like a well-known program or anything, but it was a small program, and it had some really nice artists, like some really nice work that I saw when I visited. So, and then after 4 years of fine art, I kind of had to figure out what to do next, and animation was something I was always interested in. Like I loved Roger Rabbit, and I think I did a speech on Roger Rabbit at school when it came out, and I learned all about how they integrated live action and animation and all that. And I was always into like the Disney stuff when I was younger. So I thought, maybe I'll give Sheridan a try, and then I applied to at the time, Sheridan had two programs, a 2D program and a 3D program. I applied to both, and I didn't get into the 2D one. I got into the 3D one. So then I was just like, all right, let's do it. And then that was like an 8-month course at Sheridan. And then from then on, I was lucky enough to kind of get work, and I've been just kind of learning most of my animation through actually working on jobs.
You mentioned Disney as an early influence. I'm curious which films really reached out to you and inspired you the most.
Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood. That was the main one, actually. That was the one I watched over and over again. And I don't know what it was about it. I just liked everything about it. And then when I think back to it and I watch it, some of the acting in that is really nice. And I remember noticing some of that kind of acting, even like when I was a kid watching it. So it's just funny that I remember like certain scenes that I really liked, and when I go back and watch them, I'm like, oh yeah, those are really nicely acted scenes.
Did you ever think about pursuing traditional animation as a career?
I did, yeah. But at the time, after doing fine art for 4 years, I really didn't have the drawing skills to do traditional. I had to do like a test to apply for that program. And I didn't really understand exactly, I had to like do, a character reacting to things. And I didn't really understand like how to keep the character on model, or like I hadn't really studied life drawing that much. I'd done like a little bit, but not the way the animators do life drawing. So yeah, I thought about 2D, but at the time that I was getting into animation, the whole industry was starting to shift into 3D. And that was kind of new. Like Incredibles was just coming out and stuff like that. So things were kind of really exciting on the 3D side. Mm-hmm. And on the 2D side, things were definitely kind of dying out. I think I can't remember when Home on the Range came out, but I feel like that was kind of the last, Disney thing that was just kind of starting to peter out at the time. So at the time, yeah, it definitely felt like 3D was more kind of a future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your student film at Sheridan is hilarious. I watched it. It was the first time I'd seen it, but recounts the story of Sean McChia and his tormented childhood as a chia pet that can't grow plants. So I was wondering, what was the inspiration for that?
That was Creature Comforts. I was basically just like copying Creature Comforts idea. It was kind of a combination of Creature Comforts, and I don't know if you've seen Being John Malkovich, but there's like a little in the middle of that, there's like this little mock documentary about him and the puppets in the middle of that film. And I remember really loving that movie and wanting to kind of make like an animated version of that little mock documentary section. So that was kind of how the Finding Chia thing came about.
You know, it's funny, as I was watching it, I saw shades of the introduction of The Incredibles where Teddy Newton is narrating. I'm wondering if you were paying homage to that or inspired by that in any way.
Actually, so yeah, Incredibles hadn't come out when I was in school. I think it came out the year after I graduated. But when I saw that in The Incredibles, I was like, oh man, like I loved that scene after, I saw it. But that's the kind of thing I was really interested in at the time. Like, I think a lot of people in school were really into doing broad animation of like action. And I just wanted to do subtle characters sitting in a chair, talking, doing like kind of really subtle eye things and hand gestures and like really natural. I was just kind of drawn to that, which is why I liked Creature Comforts, because it felt like it had a lot of that. So yeah, I was definitely drawn to that kind of thing. And then when I saw it in The Incredibles, I was kind of blown away with how amazing that looked.
So after completing school, where did you get your first big break as an animator?
I was lucky enough, Sheridan has like an industry day at the end of the class. So I was lucky enough to get hired from like a local studio called Guru. And they do mainly like commercial and television work in Toronto. So they hired me to do like the guy that runs that studio is very, he loves kind of art. He's kind of on the artsy side of animation. Like he loves kind of the art of it, even though he's like a commercial studio. He just loves like animated short films, and he's like very kind of artsy oriented. But anyway, he liked Finding Chia, and he basically wanted me to do like a promo, like it was like a 10-second promo, and he said, okay, you can do everything. You can storyboard it, model it, design it, rig it, animate it, light it. Like I had to do everything in 3 weeks. And it was like I had worked on that short film, but it took me 4 months to make that, and I still didn't really know what I was doing. So anyway, I had this job that I was supposed to spend 3 weeks on, and it took me about 2 months to do it. He only paid me for like 3 weeks, but I just kept coming back to the studio anyway and working on it. And he was really good about it. Like, I think he just knew I was like, yeah, just like struggling with it. So he just let me work on it for ages, even though I didn't get paid. I finally finished it. And like, he was really happy with it. And then he hired me for more things after that. And I slowly kind of learned how to animate. But yeah, I had so many grand ideas for that little 10-second short, and I go back and watch it now. It's really hard to watch.
Well, I guess that answers my next question, which was how do you adjust to higher pace and having deadlines? And you kind of learned on the job. And after that, would you say the next thing that you worked on there, you were a little bit more on schedule with what he wanted, or?
I was, yeah, and I think I ended up doing. It's kind of more of a freelance type studio. So I think my next real job after that was I worked at a TV studio working on a series called Shoebox Zoo, but it was that was like my day job. And then I would do I would work nights at the commercial studio doing freelance. The TV stuff really helped me. That's what really kind of helped me get my groove with animation, because I had to just pump out stuff, and it just had to, you just have to do 20, 30 seconds a week or whatever. You just have to finish. It doesn't really matter if it looks very good. You just have to finish it. So that's what really helped me get a flow for working really fast.
Okay, so tell us about your first feature film, Everyone's Hero.
So that studio that it was made at was actually like a TV studio, and that was the first feature that they had as a studio. So everybody working on it was basically from TV. They got this feature. So it was a good chance to kind of get into feature without having, it's hard to get into feature because you need feature experience, and then, that kind of thing. So it was just kind of this feature just landed on everyone's lap for all these TV animators. And I got a chance to work with some really, really strong animation leads who I'm still friends with to this day. And they were the ones that really shaped my career and taught me basically how to animate. Like everything that I know was taught from those guys, and it was a huge influential experience. And it's so funny because 3 people that worked with me on that film are working with me at Pixar, like 3 other people. And then when we watched the Annies the other night, two people that I worked with on that film won Annies. It's just like, it was like such a major film for all these people's careers that just like launched them into other places. It's really interesting.
I had it on my list to watch for years, and I never got around to it until I saw that you worked on it. So I watched it actually last week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
It's rough by comparison, to today's stuff. But I mean, considering when it came out, it's not that bad. And I also watched Tale of Despero, which I hadn't seen.
That was a big film for Framestore, Tale of Despero, because they hadn't really done, kind of feature animation, like character feature. They usually do more like effects stuff at Framestore. But yeah, that was their first kind of full doing the whole, character animation.
So how did that come about, and how did you hear about it and jump on board?
I was working in London at the time. I was at MPC working on Narnia, Prince Caspian, and then I had heard that Framestore was doing Despero, and after Narnia was finished, I applied to Framestore because they were like finishing Despero. I kind of got on the very end of that show, like when they were bringing people on to just help finish it. So I only did like a few shots, and like most of my shots were cut because they were all just like little kind of in between shots, and then I had one shot that was, I think, made it in there. So I really didn't work on the film that much, but it was a good chance to kind of work at Framestore. I really liked it there, and then I ended up going back there for Where the Wild Things Are.
So I'm curious if during this whole time you're working in television and visual effects and all these different corners of the industry, are you also pushing yourself, doing personal tests and personal projects after hours?
Yeah, definitely. So after Everyone's Hero, a couple of friends of mine applied to Pixar because they were hiring for Ratatouille to help finish Ratatouille. And we had friends, so like our animation supervisors at, on Everyone's Hero went to school with a bunch of animation supervisors at Pixar. They're all from Sheridan. They're all Canadian. So they know them. And it was kind of like, they had heard that Pixar was hiring, and then they had said to these guys who were really good animators, they're like, oh, you guys should do an animation test. So those guys did an animation test, and I was going to do one with them and apply, and I never did. I never finished it. It kind of stressed me out, and I didn't finish it. So then they applied, and they got hired. And then I ended up going to London to work there. But I had kept in contact with those guys, and in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, I really want to do this animation test that I never finished. So that animation test was actually, you had mentioned my demo reel. That animation test was the first one on my demo reel. That was the one that took me ages to finish, but I finally finished it. And then while I was in London too, I also worked on the other one on my demo reel, the last one. Mm-hmm. So I had known that Pixar wanted to see like personal animation tests as like part of their, that's what they like to see on demo reel. So I had in the back of my mind, I'm like, that I wanted to do those. So I would work on them in the evenings.
So how long did a shot like that wolf shot take you?
Well, I worked on it over about 2 years.
Yeah, I have similar shots, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I started it, restarted it over and over again, and I never finished it. It was kind of a very painful shot to do.
So with a shot like that, I mean, the word efficient comes to mind when I see something like that. First of all, it's a great shot. It's inspiring to see something like that. But also, like, you can't really take anything out of it. Everything that's in there needs to be there. And there's like an economy of in-betweens. Everything's very sharp. Were you just constantly over the course of 2 years pushing it to get to there? Or was there a point when you kind of figured out, how to push something or how to sharpen it up like that?
All of that came out of that animator that I worked with on Everyone's Hero named Morgan Ginsburg, because that was his style. His whole theory about animation was exactly that. Yeah, like clarity, honesty, interest. You know what I mean? Like, I have this whole book of advice that I got from working with him that it's just like little bits of animation advice that he told me, because at the time there was no YouTube or no like online animation stuff. It was like I got it all from him, and it was all that kind of stuff, like how to do gestures that are spontaneous and how to do things that don't feel cliche, and it was like that was ingrained in me from him. And so that's kind of what my goal was with that test was to do something original, something like interesting and like that I hadn't seen before, and like honest, and like you know what I mean, without kind of the animation-y extra stuff that's, you know, people add in sometimes.
Yeah.
Like he's a 2D animator, so he's got a really sharp eye. So he would like go through my shots frame by frame and like say, okay, this in between needs to be favored this way. You know, take out 2 frames from this, and like so he would kind of teach me how to do timing really tight. That's kind of how I learned that kind of stuff. Yeah, and it kind of stuck with me. But when I look back at it, I think at the time because I was still a pretty new animator, I was still struggling with like broad ideas, but I was like focusing on these tiniest little in betweens. So it was kind of good and bad. Like I was like focusing on these tiny little details, but I would miss the broad ideas sometimes. Like some of my overall poses and that aren't you know, that great. And I don't know. It was just like, it's really interesting to think back, like how I was really focused on like little tiny in between things at the time.
Yeah, it's still, you know, it still holds up, and it's especially, you know, you might not like some of the poses, but in motion it really works. So you made this reel. It obviously landed you a job at Pixar. So what was that like when you got your email or your call and you find out you're going to Pixar?
Yeah, it was kind of unreal, because you know the whole thing was like a couple of years in the making, because my friends had gone down there a couple of years ahead of me, and it was in the back of my mind that whole time, like that I should apply. And so it was a kind of a very surreal moment to get that call. And it is really funny too, because the woman is very like, you're going to be an animator at Pixar, like, and she even kind of says it like it's like a TV show or something like that. I was thinking how funny that was, but it was it was really cool. It was really exciting. My husband, we kind of like jumped around the room, I remember, when I got that call.
So what were your first few days at Pixar like, and what was some of the first assignments that they gave you?
So when you go there, you start off with training to learn the software, and so that was kind of my first few days, was just in training. They give you like a mentor, like another animator as a mentor, and that was really intimidating because I was, you know, really nervous, and I was just making a lot of mistakes. And I remember going to dailies on Toy Story 3 and just being kind of like blown away with like the stuff that I was seeing, and like feeling really scared. And then I think my first shot was just like a bell ringing in Toy Story 3. It's just like, so it's just like one control vibrating. That was like my first shot. So I had like a lot of kind of background stuff, and I kind of slowly worked towards more kind of main kind of character stuff. But like I really worked really hard. Like I stayed really late, and I stressed over all of those shots.
So they start out by trusting you with one AVAR, is that it?
Yeah, AVAR, right? Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So you do have some nice shots from Toy Story 3 on your reel. Was it surreal animating Woody and Buzz and Jessie?
It was. Yeah, it was. It was really surreal. It was surreal, like working in that software. Like I'm kind of used to it now, but every time I go back to Maya, I realize how good our software is. If there's something in the graph that's like it's like the math of the graph that's really smooth. You can get really fine detail slow-ins, and like it's so smooth, the graph. And then when I go back to Maya, it's really chunky and kind of clumsy. But it was just really interesting. That was like the first thing I remember noticing, was just like, wow, I can get so much detail in these slow-ins. And they have like a whole different kind of approach to animating there, in terms of like the way they talk about controls, like AVARs and things. So it's like they have their own like language. So yeah, it was interesting to learn a lot.
Okay, so same question applied to, you know, Sully and Mike. And
That was another exciting moment. I think it was different for them because the rigs, you know, look a little bit different. They're not like the same characters, but yeah, it was really cool to watch monsters, and you know, watch like the shots that I really liked and try and put that into my shot, as you know, like all that Sully stuff, and a lot of that stuff that I liked was done by like Doug Sweetland and things like that. And I was watching, they had like they have like video lectures about those guys talking about their shots and things like that. I'd watch those, and yeah, it was really cool.
What was the experience like working on Brave?
So when I got on to Brave, Brenda was she was there, but that whole thing was starting to shift at that point. So I think there was like maybe 1 or 2 dailies that I went to with her there. Although I didn't show anything, like I was just getting onto the show at that point. So, and then, the whole story blew up and all that stuff. So I think I'd only been on the show for like a month and done like a test. And then all the story thing happened and the directors changed, and we were kind of off that show for a few months while they figured that out. So that was kind of a strange production to go from, like, Toy Story 3 was a very smooth production. It was like a dream. Like, to go onto this show that was like a really good story with like all these amazing animators, really good director, and the whole thing just like got made really fast. And to go from that to Brave, which kind of was like a more of a turbulent show, which I kind of find out later, that's kind of what happens with a lot of Pixar films. There's a lot of turbulence that goes on through them, because they're trying to get the best story they can, so they make a lot of changes. But there was a lot of changes on Brave. So yeah, I didn't really work that much with Brenda. I worked with more with Mark Andrews.
So who was assigned as your mentor when you first started there?
Jamie Lendes. She definitely, she helped me out for a long time. I think I would go to her just like naturally, just if I had any questions, just because she's also a really nice person. So it was like, that was like a good way to kind of get to know somebody in the department and also kind of gain their knowledge. And she's a really good animator. So I would go to her and show her my work and get her feedback and things like that for a long time after that.
So you obviously gravitate towards the more subtle and emotional acting scenes. But I'm curious how you feel about the more snappy and cartoony, exaggerated stuff. Have you worked on those kinds of scenes, and how do you feel about them?
I do enjoy it. I'm just not very good at it. I wish I could I wish I knew how to do it better. I think it was like I never studied 2D animation. So to do that kind of animation, I've kind of picked up things over the years, but I've never done a lot of it on a job. I think most of my things, like most of the work I've done has been kind of more on the real, like even if it's, it's not like realistic characters, but it's still kind of more real flowy kind of animation, not like really snappy. I did like a little bit of snappy animation at Guru at the TV studio, but at that time I didn't really understand how to do it either. So it's like, I feel like I have so much left to learn on that side of animation, and I think that's kind of one of my goals. Part of my career is to kind of get better at that style. I really admire people who can do it. Like, it was really amazing, and just how people can do these in-betweens that you're like, how does that doesn't even make sense. How do you think of that? Like, I don't know how you think of that.
Would you say it was mainly the people that had a 2D background that were being cast those types of shots?
Yeah, mainly, yeah. There's definitely a lot of people who have that kind of 2D background.
How much were you able to draw from your own background when animating Riley, a girl who likes hockey?
Well, it was funny that they gave me those because, they knew I played hockey. So they're like, oh, hey, hockey. But yeah, so I mean, I could definitely, I filmed reference of myself doing some of the stuff that she has to, that I had to animate for her doing the hockey stuff.
So you went to an ice rink, or did you just,
I did, yeah. So, because I was actually playing in a league at the time, so I had all my equipment down here with me, and then we went to there's a rink in Oakland. We just went out at lunch one day, me and my friend, and just filmed me like falling, like kind of, and then like throwing my stick, some of that. And there was all these people just going around the rink skating in circles, and they're looking at me like, "What are you doing?" Yeah.
Not a bad day at the office. So for those that don't know, I'm wondering if you could explain how the Annie Award nomination process works. Like, how does the studio nominate artists on their behalf, and are there any guidelines for putting together a reel for consideration and those sorts of things?
They nominate, like within Pixar animation, they nominate 5 people to submit a reel. So we kind of have these votes that happen internally. So then those 5 people submit like a demo reel, and I just put basically all my shots on there. And then, then they send that to the Annie. award thing.
Okay.
And, so it wasn't really it wasn't even like, I think they even say to not like cut it in any other order. It's just the film order of your shots. So yeah, it's just like a kind of not really a demo reel, but just like, here are all your shots in order.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
But you were nominated by your coworkers. That's got to feel pretty good.
It does. Yeah, it feels really good. Yeah. It was
But not as good as winning an Annie Award. Tell me what that was like.
that was kind of terrifying. No, I mean, that was exciting. It was like such a strange night, and it was like, it just felt like, I mean, I was there with like 3 other Pixar animators who all are like really good, and like one of them, Travis Hathaway, like I'm constantly frame by framing his work and trying to figure out how he animates the way he does. So it's just like, he deserves to win, and it just felt so kind of random that that I won. It was just kind of like he deserved to win that, but it was anyway. It was kind of a surreal night. It was a lot of fun.
So tell us about some of the biggest challenges that you faced, and also some of the biggest things that you've learned as an artist working on each of the films that you have at Pixar Animation Studios.
I think for Toy Story 3, my biggest aha moment was just learning the work method that they do at Pixar, which is kind of changing now that there's a lot of other kind of new animators there. But the old working style is very much like fewest avars possible, is like that was like the motto for the longest time. Everything, is very much of a layered, especially with the Toy Story characters, because they're so kind of simple and you can kind of make them flop around. It's a very kind of layered approach, very clean splines. Like you want to get rid of all the knots that are kind of, you know what I mean, and like clean everything up. And that was kind of my big aha moment, because I think even though like you mentioned, like they have these little in-betweens that were kind of timed or whatever, I still, under the hood, my work was pretty messy back, when I was working on Maya. So that was kind of working clean, and also keeping track of exactly, like just moving like one axis at a time. That's kind of their style with those characters too. So that was like a new moment for me. And it's also kind of built into the software doing that. Like they basically have like a channel box type thing, which is like a huge channel box. And you kind of you move like each thing like one control at a time. Like you don't just grab it and manipulate it in the screen the same way as you would in Maya. So it's like, anyway, so that was my big aha moment. And it really kind of affected how I think about an action, because I'll actually plan it according to what avars I need to use, which helped make me more efficient, as I wasn't, floundering with the controls. I could just say, okay, I need head FB, head LR, or whatever, in this action. And I could just do it really fast. So anyway, that was my big aha moment for that film. For Brave, because it was a more complicated character, like a human character, it was definitely like just kind of really getting in there with the polish. And the leads on that show were really good as well, like Dave Devan and Al Berlau, who just, he won the Oscar just recently. So they were just like they just had like a really good eye for acting and polish and like that kind of thing. So that was like the Toy Story world, you can be a little bit more loose with things, but Brave was very tight in terms of like, getting it. Merida was difficult to keep on model. So it was complicated with all the cloths and the hair. And anyway, that was like a very complicated show, especially coming off of the Toy Story characters, who are, really simple. Monsters, I think because I feel like I struggled a lot on Brave. I worked really hard on that show, and I kind of, learned a lot over it. Monsters felt really good to me, because I had it was almost like going back to the Toy Story world, where the characters are just a little bit simpler.
Especially Mike.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, it's hard to get a lot of expression out of one eye. But so I had kind of gone through the pain of all my mistakes on Brave, and now I could go back to kind of a more simple rig and simple character, and I felt like I could just relax and really enjoy the acting, and I got cast some really good shots that I enjoyed, and I kind of helped. Like that was the first show I think where people, my other animators maybe noticed that I could do more like acting stuff, and so that was the first show I think I kind of got better shots on. Then that was Inside Out. That was the show that I kind of ended up getting all these emotional moments, and so that was kind of really interesting for me to, like, I read books about the muscles in the face and how, I studied about like subconscious movement versus conscious movement, and I was trying to, like, I really went into like those Riley scenes to figure out how to make, especially the ones where she's in school trying not to cry, like how to make it communicate, which muscles are going to be twitching, and like I was like kind of really getting into that kind of stuff.
Wow.
With that stuff. So that was a really kind of interesting place to be, because I really like eyelid stuff. Like I could kind of get in there and just kind of, really, do all sorts of kind of interesting things with the blinks and the timing of them and the shape of them. And like, I love those kind of shots that I can kind of just get into these little details on. So I had a few of those on Inside Out, and that's kind of what I really enjoyed with that show. I had a few shots with the Mind World, and those ones I really struggled with. So, yeah, that's definitely my goal, is to kind of get better at that kind of stuff.
For sure. And Finding Dory?
So Dory, I took like 6 months off to have a baby. So I was off that show. Like I missed like the middle of it. So I was on the beginning and then the end. That was a fun show just because it was like, Finding Nemo was always one of my favorites. So it was one of those really exciting moments again of like working on a character that I've always really loved, and also getting a chance to watch Finding Nemo as reference and figure out the fish thing was really complicated and difficult, but also really interesting because I'd never really animated that kind of locomotion before, and it was difficult for sure. But that was like more of a a different kind of thing, because it was like, it felt simplistic because it's kind of like, basically it's like a face on a ball, but then the ball's like in the water, and then it's got all the fins, so it's kind of like, it's kind of simple but complicated as well. I probably learned more about like fish locomotion on that one.
So what is it about these more emotional and subtle scenes that attracts you as an artist?
I'm always kind of drawn to that whole kind of honesty in the performance and making a character feel really alive, and all that stuff. I can just kind of make it feel more honest than like broad cartoony animation. I think is visually very interesting to watch, but I have trouble doing it because I can never feel honest with that motion. There's something I love about when I'm kind of like, when I really get into animating, and it's almost like playing with my toys when things come alive, and it's like, it's just me and this thing, and it's living, and it's like, it's kind of like this really intimate moment of like this thing that's, existing that I've created. I don't know what it is, but it's like that. I love it's just kind of creating like a performance that's really interesting and alive in subtle ways.
So do you study acting and actors?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I did definitely a lot more in the past. I think when There Will Be Blood came out, we saw that in the theater, and I remember just being kind of blown away by that acting, about Daniel Day-Lewis's performance, because it was just so, like, the subtleties that he got, like, it was the subtext that he communicated was just so interesting and like layered. That's the kind of stuff I really enjoy too, like, putting a layer on that's not so obvious. It's like something else happening underneath. So I enjoy seeing that in acting. I don't watch as much acting now because I have a baby. I don't have as much time.
So, I mean, I think you've already answered it, but just in case you have any more examples, what are some of your favorite actors and some of your most inspiring acting performances?
There Will Be Blood. There's that scene where the priest is kind of making him say his sin. Have you seen the movie? I'm not sure. Yeah. So, where he's like down on his knees and the priest is trying to make him admit his sins. And
begrudgingly doing it.
He's begrudgingly doing it, and his face and then he kind of at the end he gets into it, like he's like starts shouting it, like it's like this really really interesting transition between him not wanting to do it and then like being pissed off at the guy for making him do it, and then like somehow it all comes out anyway. And
it's like his personality takes over, and then how he would attack any other problem, he starts attacking this, and this ferocity comes out of him.
Yeah, it's just such an interesting, the subtleties that he has on his face are like so true, like he's like living that moment, and it's so fascinating to watch. Like his face gets all red, and like it's so interesting. I think that's one of my favorite scenes ever.
That's a good one. So same question applied to animation performances.
So I think one of my favorite moments is still at the end of Finding Nemo, where Nemo's lying on his side and the dad comes in and it is like, I know sea turtles, I met one and they're 150 years old. He's having that little moment with Nemo. Mm-hmm. There's something just so kind of honest about that, but then also pushed and interesting. Like it's like it's such a good balance of entertainment and clarity in the animation, but honesty in the performance. Like it's just, I love that scene. I still go back and look at it. It's just the timing of it is really nice. It's like, yeah, I really love that scene.
So come clean, did you open the scene file when you got to Pixar? And
I tried. So we have this thing, you can, called iProd, and you used to be able to kind of go through and see blocking takes and everything. And I went through and I was like, oh, who animated this one? Oh, who animated this one? And I was like, so I also looked at like who animated that one from Incredibles where Syndrome is like lame. And he's kind of doing that. Like most of the ones I ended up looking at ended up being like Doug Sweetland shots, but yeah, I definitely was like, oh, who did that one? And then I would look at their blocking. I looked at the blocking for, oh yeah, there's a bunch of other scenes I really love in The Incredibles with in the car, Mr. Incredible and Frozone.
Yeah, love those.
Yeah, and so the animator who did Frozone in that is the anim supervisor on Coco. And he's just so good. And like that's another scene where it's like the acting is so honest, but it's entertaining and really interesting. You know what I mean? Because there's like sometimes you see animation where they've just basically copied their reference footage, which is fine, but it's like this stuff is like caricatured, but it's not caricatured in a way that kind of pulls you out. It's just caricatured enough to sell an idea really strongly, but still feel really honest. And it's like that. I think that's that's the sweet spot that's really hard to achieve, that I'm still trying to find. And like the argument scene as well with Mr. Incredible, where he's like, let him compete, let him go out for sports.
Oh, John Cars? Yeah, that's amazing.
John Cars, yeah. I looked at his blocking for that. I was like, what does his blocking look like? And it's really interesting because it's like 3 poses, but then those poses are really nice. And then he just has like really basic in-betweens. But like you can tell like in that blocking pass, you can tell he's like thought it through, like exactly what he wants to communicate with those poses. And it's just really interesting.
So who did you find out animated the Nemo shot?
Yeah, that was Doug Sweetland.
That was Sweetland as well? Okay.
Yeah.
So what about films then? Can you name some of your favorite films and what you love about them and what you've learned and applied to your own animation?
I mean, There Will Be Blood was my favorite film for a long time, and I liked Being John Malkovich. I really liked Skeleton Twins. Yeah, I guess I really like character films where there's just interesting characters interacting. I used to like make notes and stuff like that. Like if there was a film that had like a really interesting moment that I wanted to get out of. So when I did that test, the animation test for my demo reel, I knew I wanted that kind of moment of the guy almost crying. I think that kind of came out of There Will Be Blood, that idea. And then also from a friend of mine was telling me that, yeah, he was just talking to me about like other films where the like guys are trying to like not cry. And anyway, so it just like things like that definitely like inspired me for that short piece. And it's harder for, film work because a lot of it, I don't really have control over. I can add little details in for Inside Out. I looked at Whale Rider. I don't know if you've seen that, but there's a shot at the end with that little girl and she's like trying not to, she's on stage and she's delivering this speech and she starts crying. She's trying to fight it. And it was like the perfect reference for that Riley stuff. Like I couldn't have asked for a better reference. So definitely kind of use that film for that shot.
Cool. I'm going to check it out. I haven't seen it. So my next question is about bad habits. And, every artist has them. Every artist is trying to get rid of them. I'm curious about somebody in your shoes. I mean, you've worked your way up. You've got yourself to Pixar. You've worked on a number of features there. You've got yourself an Annie Award. So you're clearly respected by your peers. But in your eyes, do you feel like you still have bad habits as an animator?
I do, because it's, each new shot is a new challenge. And, sometimes if the shot doesn't feel that difficult, I'll just jump ahead. I'll just jump in and be like, yeah, I can do this. And then without really planning it out. And I know that that's that's a bad idea. And then I'll kind of screw myself over later, So I'll still do things like that where I'll just kind of jump ahead and get too far into it. But I mean, I still have bad habits with sometimes the way I do in-betweens aren't totally right, or, I'm not I'm always trying to push my timing to be better. And I think, sometimes it can get kind of, flowy. I think maybe as you get older too, your sense of timing just kind of gets slower. I don't know if that's true, but you just sometimes things can get too flowy or whatever. So I'm always trying to make sure I'm keeping it crisp. It's I don't, you know what I mean? Yeah, I still have bad habits.
So outside of the mentor that you were assigned when you first got there, who would you say you've learned the most from at Pixar?
Since I've been there, probably my friend John Lee, who I worked on Everyone's Hero with him, and he went down to Pixar right after Everyone's Hero. And he has a very similar sensibility to me for performances. We always get cast the same shots, same kind of shots. And we're actually, right now, we have shots that connect to each other. So we're kind of we're always kind of working with each other on stuff. So I'm always showing him my work and he's showing me his, and we kind of bounce ideas off each other. We have, he's got a really good eye for detail and eye darts and acting, and yeah, he's been a huge influence for me since I've been there.
Can you talk a bit about your workflow? You mentioned using reference, but do you thumbnail, and are you one of the animators that enjoy working in the graph editor or not? And do you listen to music, and do you do sketch passes, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I do really basic thumbnails, just kind of overall body shapes. It depends though. If I'm doing a more complicated action, I think I would thumbnail more. But yeah, so I start with reference, do a lot of takes, do thumbnails from reference. I end up writing a lot of notes because sometimes I can't draw what I'm trying to think, what I want to draw. So I write down and I do arrows head up, head up, shoulders down. I'm trying to plan out the main, squash and stretch, the main body poses, things like that. The arrows at the line of action and stuff like that. But it's all really kind of crude. And then I kind of go ahead and do a couple main poses depending on the shot. If it's an action shot, I might just go straight ahead with it. But usually for an acting shot, I'll do a few main kind of beats for the moment, and then do a really basic timing of them. Watch that with the sequence and just see if my idea actually works. Because sometimes I'll have an idea for a shot, but then when you see it play through, you're oh, that's too many ideas in that amount of time. There's no way that that's going to ever work. So I try and get through that as fast as I can. That kind of seeing it play in the sequence, and then I know, okay, yeah, this is going to work. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I think a lot of times, depending on the complexity of the shot, I'll show more of a spline blocking type pass. A lot of directors at Pixar kind of respond better to that. Some directors really like step blocking, but a lot of directors who are from story kind of can't see step blocking as well as they can spline blocking. So, I do a really kind of basic spline pass. Yeah, and then I I'm kind of good. The graph editor and I are good friends now. We weren't always good friends. I kind of understand it now, and I'm still not like a really good layered animator. Like there's some, like Makarovich is like a really good layered animator. I don't know. I don't think I have that kind of brain. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that kind of stuff he can do. But I can definitely like, I can tell when something's going wrong, and I know what to do to fix it in the graph. I just don't always know how to build the shape. I need to build the shape through poses, and then I can go in and adjust it. But yeah.
So I think you've already answered this, but what have you yet to animate that you'd like to? Is it the cartoony stuff, or is there something else as well?
Yeah, I think I would really like to push myself. If there's a shot that I can do that's kind of a broad action, I'm gonna try and push myself to do it. That's definitely where I want to start heading. I wish I'd done more in Inside Out. Like I think I got scared. I asked for a few shots, and then when I struggled through them, I was like, "That's it, I'm done. Don't give me any more of those." So yeah.
So who are some of the artists and animators that you find super inspirational today? You mentioned Travis Hathaway, was it?
Yeah, Travis
And
Hathaway,
Sweetland. Anybody else?
Casey Royer, Jacinto, I think that's how you pronounce the last name. He's an animator at Pixar as well. Davi Anderson, who's an animator at Pixar. Sean Chaco, who is at Pixar as well. And I worked with him on Everyone's Hero. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of really good animators at Pixar. So I don't know like animators from other studios that well anymore because I've just been in this little world for so long. But I was blown away by Tangled, and I still go back through that and frame through. I think that's the most appealing recent CG film. I mean, I really like Tangled, and Ratatouille, and Incredibles, obviously. But yeah, Tangled and Ratatouille just stick out to me as like really nicely crafted CG animation that doesn't have a lot of kind of that extra stuff that we were talking about at the beginning. Like that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of people at Disney. I have a friend who's working there, but I kind of talk to him occasionally, but I don't know that many people at Disney. But yeah, I mean, Zootopia looked amazing as well. Like I don't know how those guys do it. Like it's so appealing.
I mean,
Right.
I love Incredibles, and I watch it once a month at least. And I frame through it all the time, but I was disheartened recently because I'm finally starting to see parts of it that look dated and look like the days of early CG, and I was like, oh no.
I know. I went back to it because actually we were talking about that the other day. They were like, Incredibles, they didn't have like really sculpted eyelids or brows. Like they were like pretty basic. And I'm like, they were? And I go back and watch it. I'm like, oh my crap, they were. They weren't like, they were right for the moment, but they weren't like perfectly sculpted or anything. You know what I mean? They're
Considering what they had, they really got the most out of it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's in your mind, it's so perfect. And then you go back, you're like, oh yeah, I mean, it is good for the time, but it's like compared to like what they can do with Zootopia now, it's crazy.
Very cool. So you play bass.
Yep.
Do you think it's helped your sense of timing or helped you in any way in animation?
Yeah. I mean, music in general has helped me. So I grew up playing music. Like I grew up playing piano, and then I played bassoon in high school, and then I learned guitar, and then now I play bass. But so music in general has just always been a big part of my life. So I think it's definitely helped me. Like when I think out a shot, I'm thinking of the rhythm. I think is one of the first things that I think of. And sometimes if I have like a thing in mind that I want to remember, I'll like write it out in music notation on my book, so I can remember what the timing was I was thinking of. And like it's just kind of like a good way for me to remember, oh yeah, I want it to go like da 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 da. And I don't know, things like that. Like I'm kind of constantly trying to think about the musicality of the shot.
That's really interesting because I do not have a musical background, and I think timing is one of the things that I struggle with. And when I look at animators that inspire me, like Doug Sweetland, it's undeniable that he has a music background when you look at his work, and there's a sense of texture in the timing and play and musicality and rhythm to his work and then when you meet him and you see him play the harmonica, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so you recently illustrated your first children's book. So how did that come about, and what was that experience like for you?
So that was actually written by my cousin. She had asked me to illustrate it like 6 years before the book came out. It was one of those things where she, asked me to do it, and I said, "Yeah, I'll illustrate that," and I never got around to it. I hadn't even really done digital painting or anything like that before. So I kind of finally just learned it. And it took a while. I really liked it once I got into it, and I really wanted to continue kind of doing more digital painting. But I think after the book was done, I just took a big break from that kind of stuff, and then I never ended up getting back into it. But I do have somebody else asked me to illustrate their book, and that's kind of now on the back burner. I'm saying, yeah, okay, I can illustrate it, but now I have a baby, and I don't have that much time anymore.
So every animator has their own strengths and weaknesses. I'm wondering if there was any part of the animation process that took you a little bit longer than you'd anticipated to kind of wrap your head around.
I would say I didn't understand in-betweens for the longest time. It sounds so stupid because it was like I knew, like, from my basic Maya knowledge, I knew I had to make poses, and then I knew like the poses would in between with Maya, and I knew how to do slow ins and slow outs, and like that was kind of that got me through a lot of TV animation. And it was just this habit that I learned where I didn't really know how to break down an action through in-betweens. I would just kind of like make a couple slow ins, a couple slow outs, then I'd kind of randomly move keys around until things kind of looked okay. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, this is fine. So it was like, I feel like now I understand a lot more about breakdowns, but it was like one of those things where I don't know why I just never like figured it out, like how to break down an action. I would just mess around until it looked right. It took forever.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I really like it here. It's hard to say like what the animation industry is going to be like at that point. So I think, eventually I'd like to try being a lead. I might try teaching maybe like later on in the future, because I like doing shots, but it is very like exhausting. Like it's kind of like bringing, everything you can to the shot like over and over and over. It does kind of get tiring after a while. It's hard to kind of keep up that energy. So it's like, I don't know if it's something I could do forever. So I think I really enjoy teaching. I've been teaching AM just recently, started teaching, and I'm enjoying that, like just seeing the students kind of getting better and like helping them figure it out, and also like trying to teach them in ways where I wish somebody had taught me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
Morgan did a good job teaching me animation, but he didn't really know Maya that well. So it was like the disconnect was that he would tell me the information, what he wanted to see, but he didn't know how to achieve it with the graph. So there was always that disconnect where I was like, I never understood the graph for the longest time. So yeah, it's really fun to teach students and be like, this is the kind of curve you want in this moment.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so he was giving you in terms of, graphically what he wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
You had to figure out how to translate that into CG, which is not always as straightforward as it looks just by drawing it.
Exactly, yeah, which kind of led to me having this messy workflow where I would kind of create poses and not really understand exactly what was going on underneath.
So you knew how to get there, but it wasn't until you got to Pixar that you knew how to get there cleanly.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so what's next for you? What's next in the immediate future for you artistically?
My main goal's to do a shot that I'm happy with, that's pushed. Figure that out. And then kind of, I can feel myself sometimes gravitating towards putting too much detail in places and, getting too live action-y. And I want to pull back and simplify all that stuff out, and just, get stuff that's really clean, kind of like back to what I was trying to achieve in the first place.
Right on. I'm all out of questions, but that sounds like a pretty good place to end anyway. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I had a blast, and I'm sure it's going to inspire a lot of students and professionals out there. So,
Yeah, thank you. This has been really fun.
Well, sadly that's all there is for episode 7, but we'll be back in no time with episode 8. As always, please send your feedback through the contact form at onanimation.com. You can also reach us through our Facebook and Twitter pages. And if you'd like to consider supporting us, there's a link to our Patreon page in the show notes below. Until next time, happy animating!